When we're writing content and skills, there are a couple of guidelines that we want to think about and work through to make sure we're getting the highest quality and we're not being redundant. When we're unpacking from a standard and we've underlined the verbs and highlighted the nouns and we've created our what we call a rough unpack, it's a great place to start. But it's important to refine it and translate the actual content and skill statements into curriculum. That a teacher could look at the content and skills and in 2 minutes or less know exactly which lesson plans they're working on. So that's the objective. I don't want to sit here and have to read through an entire list of bulleted points and then try and translate that into my actual instructional experience. I don't want to have to go through a giant bulleted list of skills. So we're going to want to make sure we have every tool at our disposal to make these content and skills statements approachable, so color coding, alphanumeric structures, headings, using bolding strategically. These are things that make the human brain want to engage with these lists. I don't care how wonderfully they're written, when faculty are oversaturated with that information and it's not divided up in a way that's approachable, it becomes very difficult to engage with my unit plan. But also, once we do make it approachable, we want to make sure it's high quality. So the actual content elements, I want to make sure they're precise enough. I don't want to just say narrative. What about that narrative? Are we focusing in on the introduction, the development of the sequencing? Are we really developing dialogue? These are those precise elements that would help another teacher who's also teaching narrative. And remember, we teach narrative at every single grade level. So what makes this unit and this experience a little more specific, rich, or meaningful? In these skills, it's incredibly important for those skills to be observable and measurable. So what does that mean? It means I can't use words like understand, learn, know, and grasp unless you mean like I'm grasping a pen. So in that sense, I'm not going to take on that they're processes. They absolutely are. But they're not observable and measurable ones. So you want to picture yourself going up to your colleague and saying, oh, we're working on fractions. Understand fractions for me. What exactly would your colleague do? Well, your colleague might define it. They might solve problems with them. They might compare fractions to decimals. Well, then those are the verbs that I want to make sure I have in my skills because they're observable and measurable. Here's one, learn fractions for me. If you feel awkward looking at your colleague and saying something like that, then the chances are the verb is not observable or measurable enough. So understand, learn, know, and grasp are easy. But there's other verbs that it's not so easy. Things like use, demonstrate. Sometimes the word demonstrate works just fine. Demonstrate a pirouette for me. I can observe and measure that. But if I'm using it for something like demonstrate using transitions in your writing, well, I'm not sure I can observe and measure that. It might be refine for transitions, okay? Or identify use of transitions in my own writing. So that level of precise skill has to be worked on and vetted. And an effective way to do that is with your colleague. Sit down, look at it, and just say, what would it look like, sound like, smell like, depending on what you're teaching, in your classroom so that you're getting a high quality, precise skill. And that skill is in direct alignment to the content statement. If both statements are precise, you're going to be able to think of your lesson plans and write your lesson objectives quickly and efficiently. Another thing to consider is the role of redundancy. If I've listed, let's say I have the cellular biology example we keep using. I've got my plant cells and animal cells and mitochondria and Golgi bodies and a couple of vacuoles. If I have already listed that in my content, when I go over to skills, I don't want to say identify plant cells, identify animal cells, identify Golgi bodies, identify mitochondria, I'm in what's called the repeat of the verb game. Okay? I could just say identify key elements of cells. The teacher can look over back at content and see precisely what those pieces were. The point here was get to the verb identify. I could also say compare and contrast key elements of cells. Well, that would work if I have my students compare and contrast everything I listed. If I really only have them compare and contrast two, I might just say compare and contrast plant cells and animal cells. I should be that precise. What I don't want to do is just say, I have a skill, compare and contrast. Compare and contrast what? I need to have that precision, or else now a teacher has to sit here and rewrite everything for their lesson plans in the moment. That makes their planning time double and triple. Again, every minute we spend making content statements and skill statements precise, observable, and measurable is hours of time saved when we get to the planning.